All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Matthew Kakuzi, and I am the Chief of the Data Ops and Capabilities Development Division here at CDAO. As your moderator, I'm thrilled to be part of this month's Innovation Connect. Before we dive into the fascinating topic of the day, I'd like to go over a few of the housekeeping rules. If you're not a presenter, please keep your camera off and your microphone muted. Additionally, please limit your questions to the topic at hand and avoid any media-related inquiries or promotions of your company or organization. Please submit your questions through the chat. Today's presentation will highlight how SAF CDM and AiSquared used data and artificial intelligence to enhance the Department of the Air Force. Without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed speakers. We are honored to have Mr. Warren Stull and Dr. Benjamin Harvey as our speakers today. Mr. Stull currently serves as the Chief Data Engineer for the Air Force Counter Insider Threat Program and has an extensive background in security, architecture, and software development oversight for high-profile solutions. He's partnered with several DoD components and the intelligence community to deliver enterprise technical capabilities for data analytics and business intelligence. Dr. Harvey is highly accomplished, holding multiple degrees in computer science and research positions at various universities and organizations. He's the founder and CEO of AiSquared, a company that specializes in adding AI and ML to business applications to improve decision-making for innovation. Utilizing his academic training and expertise, Dr. Harvey has made significant contributions to the federal agency space. We're excited to hear from both of our distinguished speakers today. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Warren Stull. I am the Chief Data Engineer for the Concepts, Development, and Management, Research and Analytics, Advanced Analytics Division under the Secretary of the Air Force, SAF CDMR. Over the past few years, our team has worked towards providing innovative solutions to meet the challenges of data management, data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. For example, we've successfully closed out a $1.7 million TACFI award to deliver homomorphic encryption, a capability that falls under the umbrella of privacy-enhanced technology to provide protection of tactics, techniques, and procedures for sensitive mission data needs. Homomorphic encryption capabilities are available today to everyone within the NIPR Vault platform, and there are plans to provide this capability on other networks and data fabrics. Additionally, with the help from the highly skilled Vault team, we deployed one of the largest data analytic platforms within the NIPR Vault to provide us a continuous intelligence platform to identify human behavior patterns in complex data sets that reach the threshold of insider threat mandatory reportable events under Executive Order 13587. The SAF CDMR team is also engaged with the Secretary of the Air Force on Project SAVES, which helps with suicide prevention, as well as technologies which ensure quality of services for AI ML algorithms. Please reach out to me directly if you'd like to hear more about these capabilities. Next slide. Today, I would like to introduce to you one of our new efforts and partnerships with AiSquared. This effort is a $1.25 million SBIR Phase 2 offering submitted to AFWorks and anticipate its award in the next several weeks. The lines of effort for this SBIR are flexible enough for us to include other mission sets as part of the 2.x level of effort. Next slide. We call this capability the Objective Data Assessment Framework, ODAF. As depicted in the bottom of this data mesh service mapping slide, integrated with the self-service data platform, ODAF is designed to couple with enterprise data mesh topologies and common data fabrics to assist data consumers with the discovery of undocumented data sources relevant to their mission needs. First, the data consumer defines a unique use case schema, which includes the lexicons, the use case vocabulary, and the sentiment, also known as the use case polar or opinion words, to help define the use case schema. The data consumer additionally defines the minimum quality of data services measurement rules. For example, the AI/ML algorithm is defined so the aggregate of undocumented data sources. We have an open mic. The AI/ML algorithm is defined so the aggregate of undocumented data sources provided by data producers must successfully map to the use case schema no less than 80% to be considered for initial evaluation. Next slide. Second, the use case schema is fed to the AiSquared AI/ML algorithm to quickly traverse across thousands of available data sources to discover data for the uniquely defined use case schema. Lastly, results of the findings, not the data in question, are provided to both the data consumer and the data producers. The results provide a mapping of the undocumented data sources to meet the needs of the mission use case. Both data consumers and producers will then work together to ensure appropriate authorities and legal boundaries are in place to operationalize a strongly typed data contract to support data sharing between their data security zones, also known as data tenant spaces. ODAF is not a one-and-done mapping tool. Authoritative data sources change, mission use cases change. The new data sources and data security zones come online frequently. ODAF is planned to be a self-service, enterprise-wide, continuous vetting, mission-to-data mapping capability that ensures quality of data services are always being delivered to the mission use case. Data consumers will be able to run these reverse extract, transform, and load AI/ML algorithms periodically, as well as refresh the mappings as data and mission changes occur. Next slide. In review, ODAF will provide automated data discovery, data sources that can be quickly mined for relevance to the mission set. It provides a repeatable methodology to assess data for relevance. It reconstructs the unique mission needs of critical data structure, redefining the definition of raw data. It will perform more comprehensive data discovery in shorter timeframes, as well as align with the National Defense Strategy by ensuring a comprehensive understanding of mission domain data needs. The vision of ODAF is thousands of mission use cases seamlessly mapping to tens of thousands of data sources in real time. There is opportunity for other government entities to work with us on this project. Please reach out to me directly if you'd like more information on how to get started. Now, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Ben Harvey and his team from AiSquared to provide an overview of the technical details of ODAF. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Okay, all right, so Warren, thank you very much. Again, my name is Benjamin Harvey, and what I'm going to talk about now is really the connection between what Warren was really able to elaborate on, was just the objective data assessment framework, and how AiSquared is empowering organizations and individuals within organizations across the Air Force to be able to discover undocumented data sets, but also create the last mile integration from those undocumented data sets that are being connected and engineered into data products and the mission production applications across the organization. Okay, so some of the components that we're going to talk about for the objective data assessment framework and how AiSquared plans to empower it is that there's a couple of components associated with, this is, something that we're going to be able to connect to every common data fabric, right? The idea of the technology is that we're going to make sure that it has this data mesh centricity. We're also going to make sure, when you think about, how do you empower the organization where there are different personas that have mission needs inside of the organization? How do we empower those different personas to be able to, in layman terms, describe their mission need? Warren spoke to this as the business schema, right? But they're defining their business schemas, which are the translation of the mission need into requirements all the way through to being able to access the data, undocumented or documented, across the organization to create data products that can then be utilized to feed those mission production applications, whether they're new mission production applications or whether these mission applications are actually legacy apps that are extremely hard to integrate into. We're going to talk about from both of those ends of the spectrum and how AiSquared and the ODAF is going to really support that end-to-end integration from the business schema all the way through to illustrating and using a framework to be able to illustrate what data sets that you want to connect to. How do you want the information integrated into the currently existing application? All the way through to making it actionable, making it relevant, making it timely, making it contextualized so that it can really support that data-driven decision-making for the organization. Okay. So, what we're striving to provide is really an enterprise solution that's going to be available for all mission needs, right? So we're starting at that mission need level, and we're connecting currently existing applications to those mission needs, where we're augmenting those so that we're helping provide the most significant insights back into those currently existing applications. Okay. So just a couple of things to note. We're going to talk about the secret sauce behind how we're doing this end-to-end, creation of data products, discovering of the data, all the way through to connecting it to these currently existing applications. So a couple of things to note. Organizations can see, these existing business cases, and the algorithms are, really essentially made available for reuse without exposing the sensitive data. So we're going to talk about these in-memory data pipelines where we're not making copies of the original data sets, where this really impacts data governance across the organization. The CIBR phase 2 will enable this availability of the data discovery for any mission requirement across the Department of the Air Force, and the ability to share those data products across these different applications where we're providing that data governance. We're enabling this data sharing without, think about like forklifting, these large data sets. And then finally, we're going to be able to span across, multiple common data fabrics as well. All right, so let's discuss a little bit about how, within the Department of the Air Force, this process, works for, identified data sets, right? So it starts with, the common data fabric, what we identify as, these data producer zones or these tenants. And, we think of these as the authoritative sources where we're going after where the tenant space could be inside of, the vault, right? For an example, for purposes of, making sure that the data is encrypted, we apply, homomorphic encryption, for an example. And then we upload that data to an S3 bucket, which is really, the raw data that's passed to us from that unique mission schema from the data consumer. So we then, send the data to the Databricks Delta Lakehouse, where data scientists now feed the data into data science tools, where the object really now is, think about the object is the, individual in a sense, right? So we're using these analytic tools, where we're applying the analysis, whether it's, think about statistical models, AI and machine learning, all the way through to, advanced analytics. We're applying these different analytics tools to be able to, derive insights from the data, for, essentially think about like analysts that need to take action, right, in response to the insights that are being derived from this workflow. All right, so let's discuss now what happens with, unidentified data, right? So how is this different, and how does AiSquared fit into the mix to be able to provide the Department of the Air Force with the, really with the capability to really jumpstart, right, the AI, machine learning, and the data strategy within the organization, where a lot of times what happens is that, you get so far in your data journey, and then you realize, oh wow, there's so many undocumented data sets and data sources that exist through the organization that it's extremely hard to provide your applications with the necessary information to drive that decision making across some of these mission elements. So really, right, the difference between the identified data workflows and the unidentified data workflows is that first we start with this mission schema. Okay. Think about this mission schema as it's really the mission need, right, or the mission problem that the organization has. What AiSquared does is we provide a framework where the persona that has the mission need can really, using low code or no code, illustrate exactly the different data sources that are important for this particular mission need. But we also have a process through AiSquared which goes out, understands based upon the mission need what different types of data sets would be important to meet a certain quality of service, right? And when we talk about this quality of service, what it really is we're making sure that up to a certain threshold, we're going to be able to answer that particular mission need with a certain amount of confidence through the actual data that we've been able to discover and join together to be able to solve that particular mission problem. Okay, so we start with the mission schema. AiSquared has an undocumented data AI and machine learning capability where we essentially through a insights engine that's in the browser, we start to understand things like what are the APIs, right, that exist in the organization, and from that we do a link analysis to the different data sets. And what we've seen in different organizations, we've been able to discover up to 80% of the data through the insights engine in the browser that identifies the APIs, and doing a link analysis from the APIs directly to the different data sets. We've been able to discover close to 80% of the warm and the hot data sets that are really being activated at a pretty highly rapid pace. Okay, so we're using this undocumented kind of data analytics, AI and ML process to discover the data, all the way through to sending the data that we've created to think about a centralized store. And then after we send that data to the centralized store, which is in Databricks, we're exposing it back to the tools. For an example, Jupyter notebooks, where we're creating data science, machine learning algorithms, all the way through to things like Tableau and Trifecta, where we're actually continuing to manipulate the data, but also deriving additional insights from the data sets. One of the things that AiSquared is really good at is essentially not only discovering the data sets, but also providing you with the ability to run real-time in-memory data pipelines that create logical data products that are really important to provide a direct connection into an application. Okay, so there's a mission schema. AiSquared does its magic to discover the data, but also to combine from the different discovered data sources to create a data product that is going to make sure that we hit a certain level of quality of service, right? So the data is of a certain level of quality as we are providing the results back to the analyst or the end user in the organization, the mission persona in the organization that's responsible for the insights and disseminating that across the organization, all the way through to after you get the logical data product and being able to make the connection to the application to say, hey, this is how, this is where, this is when we want the results of the query, the results of the analytic, the results of the model integrated directly into a legacy mission application. All right, so AiSquared's, what we call our prime execution engine is really behind this, the DAF's ODAF, right? So the Objective Data Assessment Framework. What we have is essentially a real-time in-memory pipeline, right? That's connecting to the discovered data sources to provide a direct access to the applications. So Prime is what different organizations use to help them really get started on their AI, machine learning, data journeys, to access this data from undocumented sources to drive decision-making across these organizations. So most organizations who are just getting started on their data and AI journeys, they don't have a lot of awareness or transparency into the data or the models that exist in the organization. So, what Prime does is, this Prime execution is it helps us leverage AiSquared's insight engine in the browser to, number one, we discover the APIs, and then we do a subsequent link analysis to identify these unknown data sources. And then using AiSquared's API discovery and the link analysis, as mentioned, we helped some organizations discover up to 80% of the warm and the hot data sets or the active data sources across the organization. We found that the colder data sets are usually copies of the source system of record, or these are data sets that are being engineered for analytics or features that are being created for AI and ML and data science activities. So after the undocumented data discovery is complete, the discovered data sets are registered into the data catalog, and then organizations register new data sources as data products, and we auto catalog, or think about like auto discover the different fields within the data set as well. So we make the data available as a logical data product in the data registry, right? So there's a registry of all the different sources that were discovered or all the different sources that were connected to across the organization with some of the data connectors. So we make this data available as logical data products in the data registry when it needs to be accessed by these different applications. And we make that available via an API where the AI machine learning models, data science activities can now have access to this logical data product. So when the organization wants to access the data within the registered data products, we use AiSquared's integration framework to help them define this business schema. And what that does is it describes what is needed, how it should be integrated into an application. We use this methodology where we have a directed acyclic graph that's lazy loading. So as soon as the application needs the data, right, and we're defining kind of what needs to be integrated in the application through the business schema, the DAG is executed. We go grab the data from the logical data product, and then we ingest it directly back inside of the application, right? So the business schema allows the persona to define, how the integration happens, or illustrate how the integration happens in the application, where it happens in the application. And then it also really supports the organization in, having a good knowledge and understanding of, is it actionable? Is it relevant? Is it timely? Is it contextualized enough to support the data-driven decision making across the organization? That's extremely important. All right, so let's put it all together. So fundamentally, the objective data assessment framework, it is going to support providing any persona within the organization the ability to define the business schema, right? So number one, we're over here defining the business schema. And then based upon the mission need, right, we create, these data products, right? We go through this, prime process, this prime execution process where, we are discovering the data, right? Where we're using the insights engine in the browser to, look through this application and understand, all the different APIs, and then we do a link analysis from the APIs to the data sources. And that's how we start to discover, where the data lives in the organization. And then what I want you all to think about is, AiSquared provides the framework that really empowers, the Air Force to illustrate, what data sets, how to transform and how to map the data so it can integrate into these different legacy applications. And then we also provide, the mission persona with the ability to, further illustrate, the how, the when, and where they would like the results of the query or the analytic. It could be an AI or machine learning model integrated into the application. And then we finally, allow them to say, hey, I built this integration, but, how valuable is that integration to the organization? So what we also provide in the business schema is a way to define a feedback loop, right? So the feedback loop empowers, trustworthiness. So it gives the end user a better, better understanding of how the organization is listening to when they say, "Hey, this wasn't as accurate as it should have been." Right? The integration was in the wrong spot. Right? It didn't provide me, the actionability that was necessary to support making a decision across this data. It wasn't contextualized enough, so that I had the background information and the why behind the KPI, so that I could make this decision. Okay, so having the ability to use AiSquared's framework to translate that business schema, to understand how do we capture the feedback from the end user analyst that's interfacing with the logical data product, right? Is it of a certain quality of service when they're looking at the results of the data? So all of that end-to-end feedback loop, but also the discovery of the data, the mapping of the data into the operational application, all the way through the feedback, and then the framework to really support that. Think of like this data-driven decision making, where you're translating the business schema into something that can be digestible inside of an application to support the organization. All right, so here's what the platform looks like in a sense. A couple of different things to note with regards to the value that this objective data assessment framework is providing. So it's helping with things like, and one thing to note, which is really important. So, this is empowering different personas in the organization using low code and no code to actually build out these integrations, right? So, we're not limiting, just the technical data scientists to be able to build out an integration with a certain quality of service in regards to the data product. So, these different personas across the organization who have the correct authorizations and authentications and accesses, right, to be able to create these data products and get them approved through the, think about like the contract generation process, where you have to get your data sources approved before they're made available. These are all things that can interwork together within, the AiSquared integration platform, where the main goal, and I want you to remember, is being able to connect to the different data sources across the organization. Or these could be API endpoints, right, that are made available as logical data products, and being able to use this framework, right, this model integration framework that really empowers you to integrate inside of internally developed apps, right? So these are first party or third party applications when you think about like a Tableau, or all the way through to first party applications that might be internally developed inside of the organization, and you want to integrate the AI and machine learning directly, or the analytics or the statistical model directly inside of those applications as well. So some of the bullet points on the value through this empowerment process, really speed to market, so decreasing the cost and the time to integrate and to scale, how data is being used in legacy applications. Also, just increasing the usage and engagement and the productivity. And really the overall adoption of, how people are using data across the organization, how people are using analytics and AI and machine learning results across the organization, right? And we've seen up to 90% increases across some of our industry customers in regards to the adoption of how they're using data and how they're using AI. Optimizing the workflows. So being able to increase the speed to insights, right, for those analysts, right, where you're going directly from the data source, creating the analytic and integrating the analytic results directly inside of the application, right, within a single workflow, right? So we've seen increases in speed to insights by 75%. For data governance, it decreases data duplication, right? So you're going to the source data repository, so you're not making these duplications on the records of the source system, because what you're doing is you're creating an in-memory data pipeline where you're providing access to the application through a logical data product, where you're connecting directly back to the source systems of record. And then we're discovering, right, those undocumented data sets, where we've seen some organizations are able to discover up to 80% of the data sets that are across the organization, where they have them cataloged and available for these different applications through AiSquared. And then, we talked about the ability to provide trustworthiness through, how we're integrating feedback into the loop, so that when you make an integration, you have a feedback step where the end user, that could be potentially an analyst, is providing feedback on the quality of the data, on whether it was accurate, whether it was relevant, whether it was timely, is it contextualized enough to support them in decision making. And then, from an insider threat perspective, so there's an insight engine in the browser, and we've seen organizations use this to better understand how end users are leveraging the data in the organization, but also from an insider threat perspective, when you think about how are individuals not only using the data, but querying against different analytics, different AI and machine learning capabilities, or different statistical models, and how they're using those results in different applications. And then if you think about the final thing is really the cognitive overload. So we've seen analysts that have to go to 4 or 5 different applications to gain insights. With AiSquared, there's an integration through the business schema of the insights into a single application, so that you can start to have the insights available to you in one single app in order to make your decision, your ultimate decision. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to show an example of this in real time, so that we can all get a little bit of a sense of how AiSquared works end to end. All right. So one of the things that we talked about, right, on the AiSquared side is really the platform, okay, and how AiSquared empowers the organization to be able to change this business schema into something that could be integrated into an application. Okay. So the example of how that works, and here is the AiSquared workspace, and it contains what we call these process model cards. And what they do is they're what we use to illustrate the how, the when, and the where the integration happens inside the application. So we go from business need to actual integration inside of a currently existing app. Okay. Each of the model card connects to different data products created by the prime workflows seen in the analytics step of the actual model card. Okay. So, one of the examples of the model card, so there's different steps, and this is from a low code perspective. This is the framework. So you essentially say, hey, in the actual data registry, what are the different buckets, S3 buckets that I want to connect to? Okay, so here's an example of us connecting to an S3 bucket. The bucket is listed here. And now we can, so for an example, select certain columns and describe how we want those columns integrated into an application. So it really helps you with that full end-to-end integration inside of an application, right? The platform offers, so we talked about, like the connection to the data and how it helps you with discovery. There's a step that helps you render, the results of the query or the analytic or the results of the transformation inside of the application, all the way through a step that helps you with feedback, right? So, hey, I want to, every time that this integration is used by an analyst, I want to ask that analyst, was it actionable? Was it relevant? Was it timely? Was it contextualized? I want to get that information, but I also want information on the accuracy and the performance and the quality of the data as well. So we provide the ability using our framework to be able to describe that end-to-end integration. Okay. All right. There's also, a registry where, think of this as, the models that have been approved by whatever internal vetting group, and whether it's the analytics vetting group or whether it's a governance board that is saying, hey, this particular model card is ready for production, and that's what any n number of end user analysts, right, would actually see in their workflows. Okay. So we also provide, really the ability to, orchestrate that across different users, across different groups. And this is, directly integrated with the organizational, think about access authorization and, authentication services inside the organization, whether that's in the intelligence community, Passport and Gatekeeper, or, any other access authorization authentication system. right, inside the organization. For a lot of industry customers, it's really Active Directory, but we integrate with any of those internal compliance systems inside of an organization. All right, so how does this look inside of an app? So what I want you all to picture and to think about is, all right, if I had an end user analyst that's working in a currently existing application, how would we be able to provide that analyst with insights based upon their need, right? So let's say an analyst says, hey, I'm interested in learning more about Alice Allison, right? So let's say Alice Allison is a person of interest. And they're saying, hey, I want to learn more about Alice Allison, but there's undocumented data sources that are out there, and there are other sources that are out there that could help me understand more about Alice Allison. And I want to be able to describe that. And I know of a model as well as an analytic that I also want to run against those documented and undocumented data sources so that I can have immediate insights so that I can make a decision on Alice Allison, write a report and disseminate that out, okay? So, the first thing that you would do on the AiSquared side is you would immediately go into the workspace, providing, AiSquared providing a low code or no code framework. You can build out an end-to-end integration where you're saying, hey, here's, maybe a documented data source that I want to go to. Here's maybe an analytic or a model that I want to use as well, all the way through. Here are some feedback that I want to ask about this particular integration, right? So after you would create the process model card, the process of integration, you would go back into the workflow. And we talked about this insights engine in a browser that helps us with the data discovery. Part of that process is all of the APIs that a user is starting to see in their workflow. We're starting to catalog those and understand, and we do a link analysis back to the data sources. So a good example here of how this would actually work. So we created this process model card that points to different data sources in the workflow of that particular end user. So now what we're saying is that using that process model workflow, we're going out to different locations of data, right? So this is an example for one of our top financial services customers in Vanguard. But what we do is we say, hey, we want to go out to some of our different locations of data where for an example, there's a score that's associated with an opportunity for sales, or there's some product recommendations across the organization, and we want to go to that data source, and we want to run a machine learning model that's going to tell us the top n number of recommendations. We want to run a machine learning model that's going to give us a score. And we want to go to a data source that's going to pull in the web and event signals directly from AiSquared. Now, you've just described that process, and you've built a model card, right? That can actually do that, right? This is it here, okay? Now, as soon as you go back to the app, and this happens in real time, so I'll stop this model, and what you'll see is that in real time, that information goes away, right? So these are these in-memory data pipelines based upon your knowledge and understanding of, what you want, the insights that you want integrated into this currently existing legacy app. And we've heard from customers in the DoD and in the EIC of how this capability has provided them with, the elimination of 8 months of work. And we've been able to come in a couple of hours. They build a model card that integrates directly from these different sources of data directly into the application. So what you see here is, we're running this end-to-end integration using the ODAF to discover the data, all the way through to running the models, running the analytics, all the way to creating an awesome and illustrating an awesome experience directly in the application. So if I run this model again, what you'll see in real time is that we are injecting the results of that end-to-end workflow that's coming from the data mesh directly into the application in real time, okay? And this happens, for any persona that builds the model card. And inside of AiSquared, we then make these model cards available across the organization. We orchestrate it it could be for Warren, it could be for Ben Harvey, it could be for a group 1 or group 2 to empower A/B testing. But we're combining the access to a data mesh, running inference pipelines, analytics, queries, transforming that data, creating data products, and then making those data products available inside of an application, all the way through illustrating exactly how, where, when you want these different visualizations to actually look inside of the application. All right, so let's look at one final example. Let's go back. So here's some active context for an example, right? So here's some active context, and one of the things with these active contacts, like let's say I have an example of a set of users inside of an organization, and I'm interested in creating a process model card that can help me understand what might be the next best action, right? If I had some trade craft, what might be the next best action for these active contacts, and think of these as individuals of interest, right? For an example, across an organization. So again, I know there's some data sources that are out there. There's some unknown data sources, and I want to build a model that can do next best action, right? For an example, I want to build a model that can do next best action. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, here, I know it's a data source that I want to connect to. There's some undocumented data sources all the way through to how I want the results rendered into the app, all the way through how I want the feedback to look, right? So what I do is I go back into the actual end user application, and what I do is I run that model, right? So I go back and I say, hey, I'm gonna run this model, and what's happening is that workflow, right? That's coming directly from those different data sources. It's transforming the data, maybe running a model, chaining a query, an analytic, and bringing that data directly back into the field of view. So what you see here are different next best actions for that particular person of interest that are associated with the data from the data mesh, right? So it's reaching out, calling the data mesh, transforming the data, pulling out the insights, embedding the insights directly back into the application, right? Based upon those documented and undocumented data sources. And now you have readily available the insights that are necessary to make a decision for your end users or your analysts, okay? Now, one final thing that I didn't show, and again, it's augmentation. So when I stop it, immediately the augmentation stops, right? It goes away, it returns to its original form. Okay, so last thing I'll show is if I go back into Alice, and we talked about the feedback loop. So one of the things that's extremely important here is that when we run these process model cards and we generate the insights from the data mesh, one of the things that's really important is that there is a level of feedback that we can now start to add into the workflow so that we can start to get the trustworthiness, right? So you think about the trustworthiness of data. So a lot of organizations don't have a high quality of data. So how do you start to involve your end users in the feedback loop so that you can increase the quality, right? But also from an AI and machine learning perspective, right? Here we have some AI and machine learning models for product recommendations. How could you increase the accuracy of those recommendations by using the feedback from those end users? So not only are we injecting the insights from the data mesh and from the models and from the analytics, we're also providing a mechanism to increase the trust and the quality of the data throughout the data mesh, as well as the AI and machine learning lifecycle. So here's an example that we use for our financial services customers, where they can say, hey, the product recommendation was useful or wasn't useful. They can give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, and that data is provided directly back to the data teams so that they can update, retrain the model, or update the quality of the actual AI and machine learning technology as well. And then from a qualitative perspective, so this is really important for decision makers. Does this model actually help you in your workflow? So for the analysts, right, who built the business schema, what they're going to want to have is data that's actionable, is relevant, is timeless, contextualized. So when the data is not actionable, it's not relevant, it's not helpful, they should have the ability to provide the feedback to help the data team understand that the data is not of a certain quality to provide me with the ability to make decisions from this data. So they can also provide qualitative feedback so they can help the data teams understand the data is not of the quality that I need to support me in making decisions, these mission critical decisions as well. So I'll stop there, and then I'll turn the floor back over to the moderator so that we can take some questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. We're going to open up to questions, so continue to post your questions in the chat if you haven't already, and I will begin reading. The first question comes from Joseph DiGiovanni. Do you have a specific mission, threads, or use cases to prove out this capability?
Yes, give me one.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Hi, this is Warren. So as part of the SIBR Phase 2 effort that we submitted for proposal, and again, we're waiting next few weeks for it to come back for approval. Our line of effort 1 is going to be SAF CDM centric. We're looking at the counter insider threat program, the ability to execute there. They're already a presence in the vault. We have the ability to quickly move on that. But then there's other level of efforts under 2.x that we're looking at, where we're opening it up to provide the ability to bring other capabilities on board to expand the usability of this and the operationalizing of it. That would include other common data fabrics such as Advana, Elixir. The goal is to be able to expand as much as we can to be able to make as much data available to the mission schemas that are defined, define that quality of data. Over.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is from Billy Sokol, and it is, does ODAF have dependencies on AWS services that are not available on Azure or Google?
So Ben, you can detail more on this, but I believe that the tool does not use any cloud-centric or unique services that are on AWS or Azure, that it's transportable across all the cloud platforms. Ben?
Yep, 100%. So, think of what we're doing is, really the middle layer. So we sit in the cloud, for an example, or we can sit on-prem, either one, as far as the platform itself. But what the platform is doing is connecting to those different, cloud services, whether it's, think about like RDS, where there's a relational data store, or where there's, Azure Blob Store. So what we're doing is we have the connectors to connect to those different data sources in the cloud, and then AiSquared does the under the hood transformation and mapping, as well as being able to kind of, illustrate actually how that data is integrated into the application. So we connect to the different data services, whether it's, think about, data that's in, the common data fabric, or data that's in, think about some of those common, Azure or AWS services, right? So we're connecting to those data sets, whether they're in S3, whether they're Azure Blob Store, whether it's an RDS, a relational data store, whether it's a non-SQL, a NoSQL data store, connecting to those, transforming, mapping, illustrating exactly how we would integrate it inside of an application, right? So it's agnostic to the cloud service provider.
Thank you. The next question is from Susan von Strusny. How will this integrate with Advana?
Yeah, that is definitely other common data fabrics are, and the big 6 are some of the areas that we would like to pursue as part of our level of effort 2.x. As we get through LOE 1 and mature the capability within the Vault platform, we are all for moving forward to do proof of concepts and tests to expand to those other common data fabrics.
Thank you. The next question is from Billy Sokol, and it is, in the phrase exposing to other systems, how is this notification being done? Are these insights enriching a stream that can be subscribed to by downstream consumers?
Yep, great question. So one of the really important aspects of ODAF and the self-service platform itself is, really after the business schemas are created, what the business schema does is it allows AiSquared to use its AI and ML capabilities to start to reach out to these documented data sets and undocumented data sets. And then based upon a certain level of quality, right, that is associated with that business schema, what we're doing then is we're creating a data product that is registered inside of this, think about it as a data registry, right? So this is a registry of data products that exist that have been registered across the organization for, to your point, other organizations to be able to access those data sets. So it happens in two ways. One is based upon the schema. We're reaching out to different data sources that we've discovered and some that are already discovered and creating these data products. Data products are then registered, and that information is made available, right, to the other. It could be it could be a downstream process. It could be some data scientist that wants to run a machine learning or AI algorithm across the data product. So these data products are made available either to an application or to an individual persona that wants to run analysis across the data. But what we also do is we make the data product available via an API, and that's where the magic happens, where you can integrate it directly inside of an application. So it's really two steps. You can create a data product, right? And you can have people just access the data product where they want to do an analytic, they want to run a machine learning model, they can access directly to the data product. But if you want to go that last mile, right, that we talked about, and support the analyst and integrate the results of the machine learning algorithm or the results of the query or the results of the analytic from the data product into the actual application, we can expose that data product as an API and let you communicate directly with the data product and integrate it based upon, right, your illustration, right, and these beautiful visualizations, and when you can integrate directly in the application. But they're made available in a data registry for downstream users or for downstream analytics or for downstream applications that want to make use of those data products as well.
Thank you. The next question is from Billy Sokol again, and it is, does ODAF provide cell, element, or field level dissemination controls? I could imagine the counter insider threat domain requires granular security controls.
Yeah, 100%. So, one of the things that you can think about is only the individual that has the access, the authorizations, and authentications is going to be able to access the data that we've made available through the data registry, right? And that's the same thing for the application as well, right? So if you remember, we had this component that allowed you to essentially connect to think about the access, authorization, authentication services inside of an organization. For our industry customers, it's Active Directory, right? For the intelligence community, it's Passport and Gatekeeper, right? So think about like mission access, ABAC, RBAC, and ABAC. We integrate with the RBAC and the ABAC systems inside of that mission element, right? So what happens is if you go to reach a data product and you don't have the correct authorizations and accesses to reach that data product, you'll be able to see the data, right, at the field level that you have access to, but everything else you won't see, right? And the same thing for any application. Based upon your level of access, what we're doing is we're making a query against your access levels, your authorization levels. And what you will see that is returned back to you from that data product inside the application is directly what's associated with your level of access to be able to view that data. So we integrate with those, Passport, Gatekeeper, Active Directory style of elements to be able to particularly allow you at the cell level, right? So, there are, different levels of classification and accesses that you have at the cell level. So we bounce that against, the services, Gatekeeper, Passport, Active Directory to see what you have. And before we make that available to that user, we run that query. If you have access, you see the data. If you don't, we hide that information from that end user. Great question.
Thank you. The next question, also from Billy Sokol, is, will this be available for DDIL environments?
I'm not familiar with DDIL. What does that stand for?
Disconnected.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, disconnected. I forget what. Anyways, it's the where you're not necessarily connected to the cloud because you're in like the middle of the jungle or something.
Oh, copy.
Yep, 100%. So that's a very great question. So the entire and we've done this for one mission element that was in the field. So AiSquared as a platform can be used directly inside of a browser, right? So what happens is that if there are data sources that you need to access that are, think about like locally on a system, right? Or they could be in the cloud, but they're, think about locally on the system, you're in the field and all you have is a laptop, right? The platform can be made available as a browser extension, and then the platform queries against the local data sources, runs the analytics, runs the model, does the transformation locally, and then injects directly back inside of those local applications, right? So we have been able to support those mission elements that don't have that network connectivity to still be able to conduct analyses on those edge, right, host systems, whether it's a device or whether it's a local laptop. It's a great question.
Thank you. The next question is from Sarah Green, and it is, you talked specifically about Vault early on and the data fabric as if that was work currently being done. Is this framework actually deployed on any DAF platforms, or is this just a demo of potential capability?
So I will initially say that we don't have it in the vault currently. Once the CIBR 2 is approved, that is going to be the first execution of our lines of effort. And then we will work outward there, as I mentioned earlier, to engage on those level of effort 2.x's to expand that to other entities in other platforms. And Ben, you want to touch on other government entities?
Yep, 100%. Also, think about the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, writ large, where, these are, three-letter organizations that are needing use of, for their analysts to be able to receive these insights, particularly in the National Security Agency, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We currently have the first joint NSA NGA CRADA research contract that was ever created, where we're working and supporting both NSA and NGA with being able to have trustworthiness in their ability to access data across a distributed environment, and then integrating that back into an application, but also making the workflows of the analysts more efficient, where they have a business schema and they can define that in AiSquared and be able to get results back. So this has been proved out, from a perspective of the intelligence community. I did 10 years at the NSA, and my last position there was the Chief of Operations Data Science. So we have proved it out there. So the next step is Department of Air Force is the plan, and getting into Advana is part of that plan.
Thank you. The next question from Diego Zambrano is, what would you say is the differentiation between your product and Microsoft Data Fabric or Data Hub for dataset discovery and management?
Yeah, so great question. So those services inside of Microsoft will allow you to kind of discover field level data within the different different registered data sets in the different data services for that cloud service provider, right? So there's a cloud service provider, and you've used, for an example, Azure Blob Store, you've used, some of their, SQL and NoSQL data stores. You can, pretty efficiently be able to access the data from those environments and discover some of the fields associated with that data as well. Now, on the AiSquared side, we're agnostic to the cloud service provider. So when we are discovering the undocumented data sets, these data sets are, mapped to different APIs. And that's really the secret behind it, is like we do a link analysis from the API level that allows us to map back to what the actual data source is. But the idea is that that data source could be in Azure, it could be in Google's cloud, it could be in AWS, and interdependent of where it exists. It could be local, right? It could be on a local server. It could be on a server that's on-prem. Interdependent of where the actual data source is, we're discovering it, right, through this kind of API discovery and link analysis. And we also, right, similarly to what they do, is we do the discovery at the field level as well, right? So once we discover the actual data source, then we go through the data source so that you can actually do the mapping, right? Because the business schema that you create, you're saying basically, hey, I want to run an analytic that's going to help me have more information for Alice Allison. So we need to know what in that data set maps to Alice Allison. So we do discover through the fields of the data and map it directly to the schema. And that's how we know how to integrate things into the application. Great question.
Thank you. Mike Edwards asked, is the quality of the data determined external to your process, and how do you push the associated policy or regulatory guidance associated with the different data sets?
Yeah, great question. So the quality of data is part of the process. One of the things we do from the level of feedback, right? So it's really important. So the challenge is that on quality of data, right? So you can run, data quality analytics all day, right? So you can run, you can look at things like, I'm going to look at the mean squared error of the data set. I'm going to look at, the correlation, right, of the data across two different data sets. I'm gonna look at the noise in the data. So you can use all these statistical methods to try to better understand the quality of data. But until you get it in front of those end users and they actually can validate that the data is providing them with value, it's really efforts, from an experimentation perspective, where you can get 99.999% accuracy, but when it gets into the hands of those end users across the organization, it's a different story. So what we do is we run our algorithms, right, from a statistical perspective to help with quality, but it's not validated until we go through the feedback loop to actually have an end user have access to the data and say, hey, it was of quality, right? The field that you presented back to me was correct. It was accurate. It was performant. It provided me impact and it provided me value in my workflow, right? And once we start to get at the field level, that level of validation from the end users, that's what the data teams use to really make a determination of the actual quality, right? So it's from a statistical perspective first, right? Where we get our, let's say you up to 80%, right? As far as, how AiSquared, right? We talked about the mapping, can make the connection from the data field to the actual data element, right? That you discovered in the data product, right? So we want to say, hey, for Alice Allison, I want this piece of information, and that piece of information is available inside of the actual data product. And we're kind of doing a statistical analysis based upon that. So that's quality number one. Quality number two is feedback. It's the feedback loop. And that's what we've seen in the organization that provides the most value in regards to understanding, right, the actual quality. And then there was a second part of that. So the policy, regulatory guidance associated with the different data sets. So that is all part of, well, we didn't go into it much, but Warren talks about this data contract process, right? So there's usually a data steward, right? That helps us. So AiSquared, doing the data discovery, from a data discovery perspective, you can only learn so much from the data set, right? So you do need a data steward to go back through to characterize, right, the data as well, so that we can better understand, like, how it's used, why it's used, and make sure that we're in compliance with those policy and regulatory, best practices, right? So we use that data steward in conjunction with the data contracts to be able to make sure that we have that compliance as far as how the data is being used within the actual platform itself. Well, great question.
Thank you. The next question is from Marshall Hendricks, and it is, how are you using homomorphic encryption?
Yeah, good question. Currently, there's several ways that we're using homomorphic encryption that we won't go about within this discussion today. But what I can say is that homomorphic encryption is currently accredited and available in the Vault platform. The ability to be able to query and get responses back from data internally without exposing what questions was asked and what data was returned is very critical to specific missions such as counter insider threat and law enforcement entity like OSI. We have not yet operationalized that within any of the law enforcement entities, though I will caveat that, but that is a way ahead there. So anybody that is wanting to leverage homomorphic encryption to protect their tactics, techniques, and procedures from the insider themselves or externally would be able to leverage that and apply it to their data.
All right, thank you. The next question is from Billy Sokol, and it is a question for Mr. Stull. Insider threat ops could historically be characterized as case management workflow. How do you envision real-time data of the kind that could be expected within continuous evaluation to tip and cue investigators and analysts?
Really good question. So we have our data analysts that sit in the Counter Insider Threat Hub. They are there to validate threats, whether they're mandatory or non-mandatory, and whether they become reportable or non-reportable. Those events occur from bulk data that is ingested and aggregated through analytics to determine highest risk based on those delivering of data. We want to get that closer to real time as possible. So the abilities that we have is the ability to then, through homomorphic encryption, do ad hoc query. So when an analyst is working an analytic finding, they're able to reach back to the authoritative data sources and actually get the most current real-time information to aggregate and add more context to what they are looking at for that individual. If that individual, for example, hit on something that was financially related, there may be other data sources or aggregate of other data of behavior concerns that they'll be able to then pull in from that real-time data itself.
All right, thank you. I don't see any additional questions, so thank you for joining today. We want to express our gratitude for your support of DoD Innovators and Innovation Connect. We have several pioneering projects underway and anticipate featuring even more in the future. Join us for our next Innovation Connect event on July 13th, which will include a special presentation by author, entrepreneur, and AI expert Chris Whitlock from AI Leaders. To stay up to date on upcoming events and registration information, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Approved videos of our past events are available on the Department of the Air Force CDAO YouTube page. We invite you to submit recommendations for future Innovation Connect topics to our DAF CDAO communications mailbox. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.